Hi, it's Alistair at Electric Scotland. This is me doing my introduction for my weekly newsletter for November the 30th, 2018. Now, there's been an awful... the news at the moment is all about this withdrawal agreement and the upcoming vote in Parliament. And it's all over the press. It's dominating the press, both in Scotland and the rest of the UK. The fear stories coming out are just absolutely extraordinary in my view. If you actually remember that when we had the referendum, the forecast was we'd lose 800,000 jobs, that our GDP would be worse off. Everything would be a disaster area. And yet, since the vote, it's been the complete opposite. Britain's done extraordinarily well. And 52% decided that they would ignore all these massive warnings from the Bank of England, the Prime Minister, the Treasury, the IMF, and Obama, and everyone. But despite all these great fear stories we got back then, we said, we don't believe you, we think Britain can do well on its own, thank you very much, and we voted 52% to leave. And that was the largest vote that we've ever had in the history of the country. And the highest turnout we've ever had in the history of voting in this country. And yet what we're now seeing is Theresa May. One can only say she's lied to us. If you look at that, Lancaster House speech, where she said we'll be out of the EU, we'll be out of the single market, out of the common market, out from under the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice, all the great words she used. None of that is now going to happen with her agreement that she did with the EU. So she has clearly lied to us. As has Hammond, as has the cabinet ministers, as have many MPs, both on Labour and Tory sides. They all went on, if you look at the manifesto pledge from the Tories and the Labour Party, both of them said we'd be out from the single market, out of the common market, out from under the auspices of the ECJ. That's what they told us in the manifesto. That's why we voted for them. They've all lied to us. And it just seems to me that no one's got any real confidence in Britain. And yet, what we've done in the world is amazing, and what we're still doing in the world is absolutely amazing. And I'm just a bit, I don't know. I've actually started off my Electric Scotland news section, which is the start of the newsletter, with an article saying it's time for you Tory Brexiteers to grow up. It's by Kathy Gingal in conservativewoman.co.uk. And frankly, when I read what she said, I was actually quite impressed. So I thought I would give you that as the kind of letter for this week. And they're actually quoting that this, it was a prophecy that this is what would happen. And they published that a year ago from Michael St. George. And so what they decided to do is they're going to take his prophecy from a year ago and they featured it within that blog. And I've given you a link to that so you can read it. And I've given you my own little bit of a take on it. It's just that I'm so appalled at what's going on at the moment. How, if we agree to this agreement, we can do nothing. We're worse off than we were in the EU, being a member of the EU. We'll be rule takers. How humiliating is that? And if you as a Brit go out into the world, everyone's going to be laughing at us, thinking we've no confidence in our own country, you can't run anything. It's appalling. I don't understand it. And no one has yet emailed me with any facts and figures that would persuade me differently to that view. So I don't know whether you're all sticking with me because you agree with me or not, but I can tell you, no one has emailed me on anything to say what I'm saying is a load of rubbish, or pointing out facts. I mean, saying I'm an idiot doesn't make any difference. I mean, why am I an idiot? Why don't you explain where I've got it all wrong? But if you actually bother to read the withdrawal agreement, and you read the negotiated deal we've now got with the EU under May, you'll see for yourself that we won't control anything. In fact, even the EU has a veto over us deciding eventually to leave the Northern Ireland Agreement and come out of the EU. They've got a veto over us deciding that we got it wrong and we want to come out. They can veto that. It's appalling. Anyway, because, I mean, I've got news items on Brexit, but not many. But I tell you, I could have put literally hundreds up from all the conversations that are going. I mean, everything I'm reading tells me that's going to be voted down when it goes to the Commons vote on December the 11th. And so I think no deal is going to be what we're going to go for, because after all, that's the default option if we don't agree to a deal. So it'll be a no deal. And frankly, I can't see we've got anything to fear in a no deal. We've got no deal. We keep the 39 billion to ourselves, can spend it here in Britain, which is marvellous. So, I don't know. Anyway, I'm just saying, I mean, I hope if you agree with me, you're trying to persuade other people in whatever walk of life you're in to support coming out with a no deal. Because that's now the best option we've got, in my view. Okay, so anyway, here's the stories I picked for you this week from the various newspapers. The first story is Iron Age Celtic chariot unearthed. Amazingly decorated, it says. It says the chariot could be 2,500 years old. And while there is some speculation that a chieftain or queen would have been buried with it, no human remains have yet been found. There's some great pictures and stuff on that, and it's, at least I thought it would be a good story for you to have a wee read at. Then the next one is why LBC has the BBC rattled. It says the former head of BBC Television News, Roger Mosey, is becoming required reading in the New Statesman. His latest piece explains why the startling growth of the London-based talk radio station LBC, along with the punchiness of its additional proposition, is unsettling the BBC. And to be honest with you, I've been down in the BBC for quite some time, because they're not a neutral party for certain. They're anti-Trump, anti-Brexit, and they make no bones about it. And I think that's just wrong. So, but it's nice to see they're being attacked, and it's nice to see that maybe they're going to have to change their views a bit. Someone says that they think the views are softening because so many people are now turning off and not bothering watching them anymore. The news programs, anyway. Okay, the next story is European Curling Championships. Scotland beats Sweden to secure the gold medal. So good on Scotland, well done. And I think in Canada, curling's very popular, so between Canada and the UK, you might want to have a wee read at that story. The next one I've got for you is Parliament cannot simply block the no deal, as some are claiming it's the default option. Nor is it possible to surmise how the Prime Minister and Chancellor of the Exchequer can plausibly make the case that there is a good chance of a no Brexit. But again, if you're trying to look at this no deal stuff, that'll give you some facts and figures behind what the default position is. Then HMS Duncan. Scots-built Royal Navy warship swarmed by unprecedented Russian jets in new footage. It says dramatic footage is being released of the moment a Scots-built warship was swarmed by 17 Russian jets as she led a NATO fleet through the Black Sea. I mean, that is just disgusting. Absolutely disgusting that that could even happen. And I think with the aggression that Russia's showing, because obviously they've taken these Ukrainian warships, 3 of them, and kept their crews captive, it's appalling as well. We've got to watch Russia, you know, because, well, we have to watch Russia. Read that article, you'll be appalled. Then one from history, the female shipbuilder cast aside after the war. Janet Harvey worked on some of the biggest battleships built during World War II, but when the conflict was over, she was cast aside as the men took over once again. Didn't know we had women in the shipyard, but when I think about it, of course we would, because a lot of these expert ones would have been taken up for the Army and Navy and so forth. So, I mean, clearly they didn't have the workers, so they trained up some women. I think there was 5 women that were with her. So interesting wee historical story, that. Then Trump says Brexit agreement may hamper US-British trade. Says US President Donald Trump said on Monday the agreement allowing the United Kingdom to leave the European Union may make trade between Washington and London more difficult. He's quite right. And that's just another implication from getting a really bad deal by our traitorous Prime Minister Theresa May. Okay, fact-checking the dubious withdrawal agreement arguments being put to MPs. I thought maybe I should put this one up. It says, over the past few days we have been made aware of some extremely dubious arguments being made to try and convince wavering Conservative MPs to vote in favour of the draft withdrawal agreement between the UK and the EU. So that's maybe some factual stuff. It comes from the Conservative Home. So it's a Conservative article. Then Dandy Dinmont breed sees the light at the end of the tunnel. I never actually heard of this breed, but apparently the Dandy Dinmont Terrier, named after a Sir Walter Scott character, has been described as Scotland's forgotten breed. I didn't actually see any grower. I saw the puppies in these pictures, but they're quite cute. So you might like to read that if you're looking for maybe a new dog for the home. Then it was the staircase lawyer, David Rudolph, backs not proven verdict. It says US lawyer David Rudolph, who features in the documentary series The Staircase, finds Scotland's unique 3-verdict legal system fascinating. In fact, my friend Nola Crew, who's a big lawyer in Canada, she also likes that not proven verdict. But I'm hearing in Scotland we're looking to maybe get rid of it. So perhaps you should have a read at that article and see whether maybe you agree that you should get rid of it or not, as the case may be. Then, as I know a lot of people like Outlander, this article is The Real Highlanders, North Carolina. It says a new season of Outlander follows lead characters Clara and Jamie Fraser as they make their new life in North Carolina during the mid-18th century. And of course at that period a lot of Highlanders went to North Carolina. So it's quite a long article and I thought quite a good one, so I thought you might enjoy reading it, especially if you like Outlander. Then I'm noting Australia's wild weather floods Sydney and fans deadly bushfires. Torrential rain and gale force winds lashed Australia's biggest city, Sydney, on Wednesday, causing commuter chaos, flooding streets, railway stations and homes, grounding flights, and leaving hundreds of people without electricity. So Australia is also having an appalling one, because you know you've had the fires in California, and it goes to show it's going all around the world. This. Then another article I found is Brave Scots in the New World. It's by Marcy Leavitt Burns Television. So I thought it was a kind of interesting wee article. It's also from the Scottish Review, so they usually come up with some interesting stories. Then here is the location of Edinburgh's singing Christmas postbox. It says the sound of sleigh bells or a jolly message from Father Christmas will greet anyone sending mail at the special postboxes in the coming weeks. And they give you a wee picture of it, and apparently as you put your letter in, they'll sing you a song or get music or you get a wee message or something. So you can imagine that particular postbox is going to get rather full of letters. So, good wee story of that. Then the next one is the Edinburgh Chippy is selling deep-fried Christmas puddings. As you know, in Scotland, we'll deep-fry anything, Mars bars included. So, another good wee story. Then I've got your podcast from These Islands. It's a podcast with Kevin Haig from the Chock-a-Blog. He's the Chock-a-Blog guy, basically. So I thought you might like to listen to that. It's actually, I was thinking it's about an hour long. But he's very good at analysing figures. And if you ever want to know how Scotland's finances are doing, he's the guy you've got to go to. He's tremendous at what he does. And then a relevant one, UK and US agree post-Brexit flights deal. It says the arrangement means airlines will continue to fly from the UK to the US after Brexit, the Department for Transport said. So that's good news. The Bank of England's Brexit forecasts aren't just wrong, they're absurd. This is actually a CapEx story. It says Paul Krugman, no fan of Brexit, has accused the Bank of England of motivated reasoning in the forecasts. Because, you know, if you think about it, again, the Bank of England forecasts pre-referendum were horrendous, but proved to be absolutely wrong, and now we're getting another load of rubbish from them. I mean, how can you trust people that have already lied to you is what I want to know. I mean, I would automatically say, haha, lied to me once, mate, and I believed you, no more. Okay, so these are all the stories I've got for you from the news fields. As always, there's actually a lot more in our actual feed. So, you know, for our Scottish news feed, that is. So if you're ever interested in reading all the news stories, just go to the index page and you'll see a link to our Scott news feed. Okay, so on to Electric Canadian. The Mining Review has been added for 1922. And of course the other two ones that I've been doing, that we've now completed those. So that's the Industrial Review and also the provinces. So they've all now completed. So I got a new kind of regular one for you, which is the Canadian Horticulturalists. I've added volume 4. It's published by the Fruit Growers Association of Ontario. Some great wee stories in these kind of publications. So I've got a number I've managed to gather of that, so I'll give you one a week so you can kind of follow that through. And I'm also going to give you another kind of regular one, is Canadian Archive Reports. This one I've added the 1884 report. It's by this guy, Douglas Brimner, who's a Scot but came to Canada and became the archivist. And he did a phenomenal job of building the archives for Canada. And of course, when you read his report, he's actually giving you a few stories at the beginning, and then he gives you more detailed information about what he's actually found and what he's adding to the archives and stuff like that. But there's always some good, interesting stories. And during my work looking at this guy, I found a number of good articles that he's added. So I've also added some additional articles to his page where he was involved in them. Okay, the next story is Intercepted Letters to the Duke of Mirepoix. Mirepoix, I think that's it, in 1756. It's before his resignation from the commission. Dr. Douglas Brimner, archivist of the Dominion of Canada, selected from the materials under his command the following letters and had them copied for the commission. And this is what I mean about, I found some excellent wee articles about him. Another one I found is the Jamaica Maroons, how they came to Nova Scotia and how they left it. So that's another of the articles he produced. Then I found a book on the mineral resources of Canada. This publication was to celebrate the visit of the British and continental mining engineers and metallurgists to Canada in the summer of 1908, and it was published by the Canadian Mining Journal of 1908. So I thought that was quite a good factual article there, or book in fact. Then monograph of the Dene, Dingy Indians. Again, it's by the Reverend E. Petitot Osley, missionary. It's translated by Douglas Brimner again. Again, this is something he found really interesting, and he took the trouble to translate it so that we could read it in English. And then I finish up with Electric Canadian with the Trois Mongrels. It's like the two dogs in Burns one, you know. A modern eclogue by Thomas Teedles. It's done in 1876, which you can read this at, and I give you a link to it. Then on to Electric Scotland. I've got a book for you. It's called The Lady Jean. It's a novel, but it gives you a little bit of an insight. This is produced in 1904. It gives you an insight how people wrote kind of romances and love stories and fraught deals and everything back in the day. So I don't know. I kind of scanned it rather than read the whole thing, but I thought, well, it's quite interesting. Then a little book of Christmas. I mean, I read this. For me, right, there was 3 stories in this book. I loved all 3 of them, and really enjoyed the first one in particular, but I also enjoyed the other 2 as well. So I thought I'd put it up for you to read. I've actually added it to my children's section, children's stories as well, because I thought, well, it is more, maybe it's be more read by children, but I think it might be something you might want to share with your kids near Christmas time, or even read them the stories. Okay, Andrew Young of Edinburgh, 1807 to 1889. I got sent in a picture of his wife with some notes which I've added to his page. Basically, it's a wee article about Andrew Young, but it was a reader of the page that sent me an email and said he'd actually got a picture of his wife, and would you like to get a copy of it? And I said, love to. And there's some writing on the sides which you can't interpret by looking at the picture, but he's given me what was written on the three sides of the or the 3 borders of the picture. So I thought, well, for historical interest, I thought that'd be nice to add to the page, and that's what I've done. Then I've got the Catholic Highlands of Scotland. This is in 2 volumes, just in 1909, and basically it was, as you know, Scotland went Protestant, basically, Presbyterian, and the Catholics had a bad time for a while, but on the whole Scotland was Catholic way back. So I thought to myself, this is interesting, and I thought I would add it so you get some kind of interesting information. And I followed that up by another book by the same author on ancient Catholic homes of Scotland. So I thought between the 2 that should be of interest. Scott and Scotland is the next book I put up. It's by Leach Ritchie and was produced in 1835. It's an interesting book which offers some interesting slants on Scottish history. Obviously he was writing about Walter Scott and Scotland, but he goes into some of the history of Scotland before he goes to compare on Walter Scott. Then I've got the history of the Scottish Society of Indianapolis. This is 1983 to 2018. Apparently he's adding to the history every year. This is Carson C. Smith. And so he sent me a Word document which I've converted to a PDF. So I thought maybe you might be interested. He gives quite a good review of one of the people in the society. Then I got History of the Church of Scotland. When I came across this book, I thought, well, I've already got History of the Church of Scotland, but in actual fact, when I read about it, I actually found references to the book in other books, and they're all saying this is about the best history you could find. This guy really knew what he's talking about. This is W.A. Hetherington, the Reverend W.M. Hetherington. It was produced in 1851, and I have to say it's a one-volume history. And he wrote it on the basis that he thought most people wouldn't read the bigger histories, but he thought people should at least know what the real history of the Church of Scotland was, and that's why he produced this one book volume, so that he hoped more people would read and understand where we were coming from. And then the kind of final set of books I've got for you is the Naval History of Great Britain. It's from the declaration of war by France in 1793 to the accession of George IV. And it's by William James. And it's a new edition with additions and notes. Also an account of the Burmese War and the Battle of Navarino by Captain Chalmers, who is of the Royal Navy. It's in 6 volumes. But like everything else, because this is of Great Britain, it obviously will include Scots within it, because he's done a marvellous job about not only telling about the ships, but who commanded them, and who the first lieutenant was as well. So by reading those, you'll get to hear of a lot of Scots. They're obviously in the Navy in these days. So I thought to myself that would be a great contribution, especially people who wanting to research the Scots and the Navy and so forth. And the story I've got for you this week is, again, from Tait's Edinburgh Magazine in 1851, and it's about Queen Victoria in 1851. This is basically, it's usually these stories in Tait's are quite long, but I thought to myself, it gives you an idea of the times. I mean, certainly that was 100 years before I was born, so because I was born in 1951. So this is 1851, so I don't know, I read it through. It's quite an interesting read. So I don't know if you're interested in that period or not, but I thought I'd put it up. I've done a quick, the actual article in the magazine is not that good, so there was a lot of kind of errors in it, so I've had to kind of edit it quite a bit, so hopefully I've got most of the errors sorted out, and you can enjoy the read of that. So that's basically the newsletter for this week. As always, I'll put a link to the actual newsletter where you can get all the links to these stories and articles and so forth as a PDF file. So, there we go. So, let's see what happens with Brexit for the next couple of weeks, and we'll see whether we can get any resolutions going on any of it. Okay, well, thanks for listening, and please feel free to send me any comments. Look forward to hearing from you. Have a good weekend when it comes. Cheers.